It's time to crack the final 3 on our most tortured sports cities list now. But before we unveil number 3, as always, we'd like to recap the list of cities that have already been named. We began so long ago with Tampa, a city that won't be on the list much longer now that they've won a Stanley Cup, added that to their Super Bowl win. They're followed by Kansas City and then Cincinnati, Phoenix, Washington, D.C. at number 11. Houston came in at number 10. San Diego then ranked 9th, followed by Atlanta. At number 7 was Seattle. The Twin Cities were crowned the 6th most tortured sports cities in the country. Beantown was number 5, and Chicago came in at number 4 last week. Now, before we get to the 3rd most tortured sports city, here's how we came up with our list. We considered how long a city's pro sports teams have gone without championships. We also read all of your email, and the final element, of course, the cold pizza torture X factor. That's freak plays or bad luck that have come to haunt the given city. And now, for number 3, a city that has felt the pain of losing so many times, we go to upstate New York and Buffalo.
Sub-zero temperatures aren't the only thing that chills Buffalo citizens. The city's pro sports teams have provided enough icy moments to last an eternal winter. The Buffalo Bills won 2 titles in the AFL back in the 1960s, just before the Super Bowl era. But following the Bills in the NFL has been total frustration. It wasn't until the 90s that the Jim Kelly-led Bills dominated the AFC, but the Bills also created one of the most painful memories in all of sports history. Only 47 yards away from their first Lombardi trophy.
Puts it down on the way. It's long enough, and it is no good. He missed it to the right with 4 seconds to play.
Despite a long, cold off-season, the Bills managed to get right back to the Super Bowl in 1992, only to be herded up and sent home without a ring again, and again, and again. An unprecedented total of 4 straight Super Bowl tragedies. Since the Bills lost their last Super Bowl in '94, they have only 1 playoff win to show for it. But the most stunning loss since their Super Bowl run came in the 1999 AFC wildcard game. A 51-yard field goal with 16 seconds remaining gave the Bills a 1-point lead, and a trip to the next round was just 1 special teams tackle away. The Titans lateraled the kickoff, and Kevin Dyson returned it 75 yards for a winning touchdown. He scored with 3 seconds left on the clock. In the city, it was a miracle. In upstate New York, it was a nightmare. That same year, the Sabres made it to the Stanley Cup Finals for just the 2nd time in franchise history. Down 3 games to 2, the Sabres extended Game 6 to 3 overtimes before this. The replay clearly shows Hull's skate was in the crease, and the goal should not have counted. But at least they still have the Sabres. Bob McAdoo and his Buffalo Braves brought NBA basketball to the city in 1971, but just a few years later, they left the cold and took off to sunny California and turned into the Clippers, which, come to think of it, may not have been that big a loss. The town has also been robbed of perhaps its greatest sports hero. O.J. Simpson went from the Hall of Fame to the Hall of Shame. Fans in Buffalo have come to expect the worst. Wide right, no goal, forward lateral, losers again, has become part of the vocabulary in Buffalo. If it weren't for buffalo wings, they wouldn't have anything to cheer about at all.
That sums up the pain and suffering of Buffalo sports fans. And with us now to talk about their long suffering, pulling a double shift on today's show, the moderator of NBC's Meet the Press, and more importantly, as he regularly mentions on his program, a lifelong diehard Buffalo sports fan, Tim Russert. Tim, good to see you. And also in studio, Buffalo News sports columnist Jerry Sullivan. Tim, what kind of identity does Buffalo get because of their sports teams over the years?
Well, Buffalo is more than a geographic location. It's a way of life. And we see the Buffalo Bills as an extension of that. When the Bills take the field, they're not playing just for Ralph Wilson, the owner. They're playing for the whole city of Buffalo. Kind of a gritty, blue-collar town that believes passionately in them. You know, I hear all the knocks about Buffalo because of snow and the Super Bowls, but we have been to the Promised Land 4 years. Never to the mountaintop.
Right.
But we will get to the mountaintop.
You've seen the mountaintop. You write in your book, to me and to so many people in Buffalo, they represent our city and the tough times it's been through. When the team loses, the whole town feels it. And when they win big, Well, we're still waiting to find out what that's like. Will you ever find out what that's like?
My dad says that Buffalo Bills fans will live forever, that they will not die until they win a Super Bowl. But you have to come up there for a game, particularly when we're in the playoffs. People are hanging sheets and banners from downtown office buildings. Right. It's like a college town in many ways. And I was actually there in '64 and '65 when we won the American Football League title, which was extraordinary. But it's nothing like the Super Bowl. But we're going to get it. Hang in there.
Jerry, 4 straight losses in the Super Bowl, a feat that has never been done before, or probably ever will be again. When you look at it, it almost is like the Buffalo Bills are to football what the Boston Red Sox are to baseball. Is that a fair comparison?
Well, it's funny you should mention that because I grew up in Rhode Island as a Red Sox fan, so I feel uniquely qualified to have settled in Buffalo almost like it was fate. I think Buffalo people feel there's a certain nobility about the losing. They say God doesn't give you any more than you can handle. And I really do believe they feel almost chosen in a sense. Maybe at some point it becomes like a rationalization. They don't want to be seen as losers. But they do very much see themselves as that hardworking, blue-collar, tough, resilient people. And in his great book, I think Tim's father, Russ, becomes a symbol of Buffalo, very much so, the way, as he says, the teams have become. I was there. I was lucky to get to Buffalo in 1989, and I was there for the 4 Super Bowl losses. I feel privileged to have been there. Wish they would have won one. Right. But there will never be anything like it. And I think there's very much a sense of pride. On the radio station I work for, they ask every year around Super Bowl time, would you rather have won one? Would you trade one Super Bowl win for being there 4 times? And most people say they'd take the 4 losses.
Really? What about, would you take that, the 4 losses over 1 win?
I'll take the win.
I would take the win, too. I would definitely take the win.
You know, I was at the airport in Washington one time, and the gentleman came up behind me and said, "Excuse me, Tim, I just want to introduce myself. My name's Scott Norwood."
Wow.
I said, "Scott, I know who you are. I think about you every night. Wide right. 47-yard field goal."
How was he doing? I mean, did you ever get over something like that?
What do you think?
I've read interviews with him, I think 10 years after. I think he got over it. I wrote that night that this will be remembered as Scott Norwood's kick, but that the defense really lost the game. I've gone back and watched the film. It's sickening how they were outcoached so soundly by Bill Parcells that night. And it never should have come down to the kick. And I believe in his heart of hearts that Scott Norwood realizes that.
When you watch that, Tim, what goes through your mind?
You can't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, I see it again in slow motion. All your hopes, all your aspirations, your dream, Buffalo being the Queen City of the lake, as we'd call it, suddenly just fading off. And the next day, we went back up to Buffalo, and my dad and my son were there. 25,000 people cheered, "We want Scott, we want Scott," and brought him up to the podium, which is a big difference from several years ago. A fellow named Booth Lustig was a field goal kicker for the Buffalo Bills, and he missed the field goal at Old Memorial Rockpile.
Right.
He decided to walk home down Delaware Avenue. 2 guys jumped out of the car and beat the hell out of him.
Yeah, so they've come a long way.
It's a different spirit some days, right?
Tim, what do you remember most about the Music City Miracle?
What a fraud it was. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
And here's the Vice President of the United States from Tennessee defending it. Look at it. I mean, clearly. I mean, if that's not a legal forward pass, what is?
Here it is.
Let's watch this.
Come on. It's not even a close call. Look at that. Now, come on. Look where he's standing.
You know, I've looked at that play, like you, hundreds of times, and I have yet to see it as a legal play.
You can't be. A professor from the University of Rochester did a whole geometric linear layout of that and proved it. I mean, just proved it conclusively.
Yeah.
We was robbed, but you know what? We stand up. It's adversity again. At the end of the last Super Bowl, I brought Meet the Press down to Atlanta, and the director said it in my earpiece, "Go ahead, Phil." And I looked into the camera and I said, "Now it's God's turn, and God is good, and God is just. Please, God, one time, go Bills." And Tom Brokaw jumped up and said, "You Irish Catholics from South Buffalo are shameless. You can't pray on the public airwaves." I said, "You'll see the power of prayer, Brokaw." Well, the Dallas Cowboys snuck by 30-13.
Yeah.
I mope back to the hotel bar, and the first person I see is Brokaw. Yells across the room, "Hey, Russert, I guess God's a Southern Baptist."
I like how you said, Tim, they snuck by 30-13.
It's close. We were ahead at halftime, right, Jerry?
They still should have played Flutie.
Yes, they should have.
Jerry, this is you talk about the fluke luck and things that happen to a city, and the Music City Miracle is one where you can look at on tape and say, well, I don't know, it looked to unfold another way. The Stanley Cup Finals, right there, the Sabres are there, and then the phantom goal.
Well, no, it should not have been a goal. These things seem to happen to Buffalo. People don't know how many of these things, the layers that there are. The next year, or 2 years later, a goal went through the side of the net against Dominic Hasek. Clearly, it ripped through, and they never picked it up, and they lost the game because of that. People think about the 2 major sports in Buffalo, but and you know the history, and you know, Tim, basketball, I'm a big basketball guy. They lost their NBA team in '78, the year before Magic and Larry Bird came to the league and changed everything.
Right.
And made it just the hottest item going. They became the Clippers, who didn't make the playoffs for like 18 years and have still not won a playoff series since leaving Buffalo. St. Bonaventure hasn't won a game in the tournament since 1970 when Bob Lanier hurt his knee, and everybody knows they would have won the national title. They get the most famous scandal 2 years ago over bidding a welder. So it goes on and on. So even we should have been #1.
Wow. Tim, the final question is, I was going to ask you, will Buffalo ever win a championship? But I think I want to ask you, should they ever win a championship? Because this mystique, and it sort of fits the city at this point.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Huh? Come on, look, you're looking at 2 winners right here, huh?
Yeah, but
come on, we've done all right for ourselves.
Look at the character that it is built in the two of you, and Buffalo citizens everywhere.
We'll give you that.
Yeah.
But you know what? In the end, we will be rewarded.
All right,
I
very
mean,
good.
if we can take on snowstorms and all the other adversities that come our way, steel plants leaving, the city keeps bouncing back.
Yeah.
People get up and dust themselves off. Bills will be back.
All right, very good. I feel all of your pain, believe me. I grew up a Cleveland sports fan.
Oh, God.
And there are 2 cities left, and Cleveland isn't on the list yet, so it's going to be 1 or 2. Guys, thank you so much for joining us to talk about Buffalo's sports torture. I know it's hard to do so early in the morning, but we appreciate it. And now we are down to 2 tortured cities. Be sure to tune in Tuesday, July 6th. That's when we unveil the second most tortured sports city in America. And for more details on tortured Buffalo fans, you can log on to ESPN.com and visit page 2. We'll be right back with more Cold Pizza.